All right, welcome to the relationship show. This woman writes this post. Is it just me or does dating suck? I've been in a serious relationship that leads to nowhere. Since then, I've been single for 2 years and it's hard being interested in anyone. I think I'm ready to date, but I have a few criteria. For one, I don't date people with kids. That can actually be a good thing. It's like that's a lot of baggage that you're kind of taking on if you're dating with someone with kids. Um, it's not that I don't like kids. I love them. I don't have kids. So why should the person I'm interested in have kids? Two, I'm 30 and I don't want to play games. And so what does that communicate? I don't want to play games. So she's had some experiences where guys just want to hook up with her or whatever. But also it shows like in that like 30 and early 30s, you'll see women start to like shift and want to settle down. It's almost like maybe it's because like the biological clock, it's like they're running out of time to have kids, or they're just like they've gone through that stage in their 20s where they've just had fun or whatever, and now they're entering into their 30s and they want to settle down with someone who has basically their life together, their finances together. They want to get the house, they want to get the cars, and just like kind of settle down. You'll see that a lot with starting with women in like their early 30s. And so oftentimes you'll even see them like date like much older guys that have their shit together, or they'll date guys that aren't necessarily like considered alpha, or considered they're considered like nice guys, or just kind of like passive guys, but they have their finances together. You'll see that trend. um, I'm ready for a commitment, like that. She's ready to settle down and to cater to someone who is willing and ready to commit and cater to me. In parentheses, speak each other's love language. So this, I mean, it's such a common book, such a widespread read book, but people use it as like the only thing. And so it's like this woman right here, she's kind of using this to qualify her as like, oh, I know what I'm doing because I know what the love languages are. And so now she's kind of writing this post and saying, giving her, or at least trying to give herself some credibility in that she is good and she is a good pick and she is a good match. So why doesn't she have someone in her life? With the 5 love languages, yes, they are important. It is important to know this, but it's not, you can't almost overdo it. It's like, especially from the guy's perspective, if a guy gets into this pattern, it's like, oh, her just acts of service. And so I'm just gonna basically wait on her hand and foot. I'm gonna cook for her, clean for her, do all this stuff. I'm gonna garden for her. I'm gonna do this. It's like, yes, that is essential in moments, but we don't need it to happen all the time. And if you come across like this, you come across as like a super pleaser, nice guy. You don't come across as strong and in your masculine. And that to me is much more important than being like this pleaser type guy, this guy that knows their love languages, but just like that's all he knows and that's all he does is just kind of like seeking her approval. It's like, oh, if I do this, will you like me? And so well, what do you mean? I did the dishes for you. Now you should like me. It's almost like a trade. And love isn't a trade. It's like people often convey it like that. They don't really know what they're doing. They'll think like, oh, if I give her enough gifts, or if I take her to enough places, or if I spend enough money on her, then she'll like me. Um, so again, I think love languages are essential. It's like sometimes you really need to show that you care, and if you know specifically how that person can interpret you caring about them, then that is such a good tool. Now, that being said, you still have to have the masculinity and the femininity, the polarities. That's what really causes attraction. You need that tension and release, managing the space between you and them. You have to understand how women test and how to pass her tests. You have to understand that those tests really derive from 3 things, and that is her not feeling safe, her not feeling understood, and her not feeling seen. And so her tests will be related to these 3 concepts. And so what you can do if you get enough experience and then basically be aware of these concepts, like you can basically filter out what her tests are trying to communicate. Like, for instance, um, I mean, all women tests. So I'm just thinking of one thing. I was with my mom, actually. It was at the zoo, and what her test was she mentioned the name of this like bird, and then I just kind of did my own, well, I guess walked through the thing, and then right when we were leaving, she tested me. She said, "What was the name of that bird again?" I didn't know. And it was like, so I failed that test, but what was that categorized? It was her feeling understood and listened to. It's like, were you really present with me when I was speaking to you? And I failed that test. And she's like, oh yeah, I remember it was, whatever, Enrique or something. It was like Ezekiel, I think it was. But it was like, okay, yeah, now I know what that test is. Now I know what category I'm lacking in. And now instead of using that as like, oh, I failed, it's like, now I can use that to recognize what she's feeling. It's like, okay, she needs to feel more understood. So I need to bring up something like in her past that she mentioned to you where I listened to her, and that shows really that I care in that category. And so the thing I did was I used that. She mentioned like a fox like months ago, and there was like a fox in her yard, and there was like injured or something. She was trying to catch it. I was like, hey, you ever catch that fox that was injured? Do you ever get like bring it into like the wildlife place? And she's like, oh no. But what it did was it was like brought back a time in the past that related to understanding her and listening to her. So just use those three things. Super important. Again, when she feels unsafe, unseen, when she's not being noticed for the attention she's trying to get, and then not being understood. And then with guys, you'll see like the biggest like pain points with them is being criticized, controlled, and when their woman is closed off, meaning she doesn't express herself, he can't get her to talk, and he feels like a failure in that sense. So back to this. Okay, so she's gone over like her criteria. She says her third criteria: 3, these dating apps suck ass, and so does this generation. It's like, I don't know, you just kind of have a negative attitude towards them, and you failed. And so usually when people fail at something, or when they quit or they fail and don't try again, it's like they try to bring it down and say, oh, that sucks. It's they don't want to take responsibility for themselves. And dating apps really do work, and they work for a lot of people, especially people that can really figure out their profiles and how to get a good profile and how to convert once someone messages them, and can actually utilize all these skills, versus someone who just doesn't work on themselves and just keeps like a lower quality profile and fails over and over again, and then blame online dating. Why is it hard to genuinely get to know someone and let it be led there? Why is it hard to get to genuinely know someone? Well, maybe you haven't put the skills in, or maybe you're bringing a negative attitude, or you're not even trying. It's like, it's been 2 years since you've dated anyone. Why is sex always on the front end? That relates back to what she was saying earlier of not wanting to play games. It's like, yeah, she's probably had some encounters where guys just want to hook up with her. But it's more to do with her upset because she's now she's 30 and she's looking to settle down, and guys aren't really wanting to do that with her, or at least she's failing at trying to do it. The list goes on, but just wanted to vent. How's dating in your 30s? Okay, how can I help this girl as far as, okay, well, the first thing she's got to do is take some ownership for who she is. Like, she's got to get out of this blame game of blaming online dating, or blaming guys, or blaming, the people she's dating because they're just trying to hook up, and it's them, it's their fault, it's online dating's fault, it's this person's fault, it's their fault. And you got to take responsibility for yourself, because that's really the first step in saying, okay, now I can get better. Now I can grow. Now I can make progress towards relationships, towards gaining these skills. I can learn what guys like in relationships. I can learn to be in my feminine energy. I can learn, because these are skills to learn. It's like oftentimes people don't teach these skills and just basically throw you in there with no instructions. But the instructions are out there if you find the right people that know what they're doing. And so are you, letting him take the lead? Are you avoiding those three main pain points with guys? Are you trying to control them, criticize them, or are you closed off to them? What's your loyalty like with other guys? How loyal are you to them? Are you fun to be around? That's one of the biggest things you could do is just be fun to be around. It's like, are you excited when you see him? It's like when he pulls up, do you have enthusiasm to see him? You're excited there. You're giddy, if you will, in some cases. Like, you have interesting things to talk about? Are you making progress towards goals? Um, what's your finance situation as well? It's like, what are you doing with your career? What are you doing with this? What are you doing with your interests, your hobbies? It's like, work on yourself, figure out figure out how you can be fun to be around. And if you can do that and you can have a sense of ownership on who you are and take responsibility for everything that happens in your life, then it will have massive impact on your success in dating.